We are happy to share with you some of ALFAwetlands results, particularly considering co-creation and inclusive wetland restoration. So this is our first event in the series of sharing the results, and we will follow up with some other events. I would like to introduce shortly my colleagues who will speak today. So we have Erik Andersson from University of Helsinki. He's a professor and leader of the work package 2, Co-creation and Inclusive Wetland Restoration at ALFAwetlands. His colleague, Professor Maria Tengö from Stockholm University, partner in this project. She will also present the results, and also our colleague, our expert who had tested approaches which were developed within ALFAwetlands considering co-creation, Marie Lawrence from Michael Succow Foundation. A few rules about our webinar to make this event smooth and pleasant for all of us. So as you know, session will be recorded and it will be available on ALFAwetland communication channels. Please feel free to rename yourself, indicate your organization for further exchange. Please also keep your microphones muted unless you are invited to speak. We encourage that only presenter, host is sharing the screen. If you have any technical questions, please contact me directly in the chat. And please remember that today we will have our forum discussion, and for that you are invited to write your questions, comments in the chat, and also contribute to our Padlet, which you have received during registration. And we will address your comments and questions during this session. So we started already our webinar, and our next point in the agenda will be introduction to research and practice of knowledge co-production. As I just introduced, my colleagues, Erik Andersson and Maria Tengö, will hold this session of the webinar. After that, you will hear case examples from one of ALFAwetlands Living Lab in Öland, which is located in Sweden, and also from Upper Peene Valley from Germany, from our colleagues from Michael Succow Foundation leading this Living Lab. After that, we will jump to the next session. It will be interactive session, and we will have facilitated forum discussion, and our basis for that will be the Padlet, which you already have seen probably, and we will also elaborate further on that. After that, we will move to the closing session. We will hear more offers which we prepared for you, and also will receive some information about our handbook, about our online trainings, and we encourage you to take few minutes in the end of this webinar to fill out our final questionnaire survey, which will help us to shape our further activities. Few words about ALFAwetlands. So this is the Research Horizon Europe funded project. Its duration is 54 months, and we entered final year of this project. It is led by the Natural Resource Institute Finland in Luke, and we have 5 research work packages. I have shared a link to our newsletter in the beginning of this webinar in the chat, so you are invited to follow our news and learn more about the project there. On the picture, you see our international team, and this is one of our living labs located in France. Using this opportunity, I would like to also introduce our final event, which will take place in Brussels on 17th of September. Follow news on our website to learn more about its program. Now I would like to give the floor to our colleague, our expert, Maria Tengö, who will start the presentation of our next session.
Thank you very much, Irina, and thank you everyone for coming. Nice to see many people attending the seminar. So I would like to start with just putting wetland restoration in a particular place to make it concrete and more alive. So a slide to share about wetland restoration on Öland, which is the living lab that I've been engaged in. So it's an island in southeastern Sweden. And this island was 150 years ago, there was extensive draining of wetlands to improve food production, actually because of food scarcity. And now there's, of course, recognition that the wetlands are really important for biodiversity values. This island is a biodiversity hotspot, both for birds and orchids and insects and many other species. So it attracts many people to come to this place as well. So there is attention to how can we more restore wetlands to support this biodiversity. At the same time, the last 5-6 years, the island has also experienced increased challenges due to water scarcity. So lack of rainfall and oops, that was one slide too. Thank you. Yes, so water scarcities, and there's also this understanding that wetlands, if we restore wetlands, that can also support climate adaptations. So there is awareness of the need for restoring wetlands, but there's also many challenges. So it's actually not about just restoring patches of wetlands. It is also concerned rehabilitating this landscape that was excessively drained. There's many landowners involved, so even small interventions need approval from many different people. There's also quite a lot of bureaucracy. So there's a strong need for coordination and collaboration, but there's also unclear mandates. So it's quite challenging to move forward. So with this place landing in a particular place, I would like to then say something about what is the context and purpose of this webinar. And the new nature restoration regulation in Europe provides new support and opportunities for doing restorations, and also specifying particular targets and so on. But there's so far not so much attention in the regulation to how should this restoration happen, and what kind of processes are required for long-term successful restoration. And one term that's often used is this idea of living labs, of ways of engaging with many different actors, for co-creating or participation or including actors. And this is a practice under development, but there's a need for more support and discussion about how do we do this well. And this is where we want this webinar to contribute, to give guidance for strategic use of active and inclusive participation. And in particular, we want to do that by sharing the approaches for knowledge co-creation that we developed within ALFAwetlands, and use that as a basis for discussing how can living labs work well. So then what do we mean by co-creation? And here today we'll talk about it as a more broad approach, a way of working with stakeholders, with different stakeholders, and getting them engaged in different ways. So it's both about participation, but and also collaboration. And so beyond than just consultations, but getting them engaged and involved in projects. And a term that I find quite useful to think about in my research and in my work is this idea of usefulness for all involved. So how to engage with actors in a way, not just to get input for research, for example, but also for mutual value. And then co-creation then involves involvement in different steps of a project or in an initiative. So both around planning, around mobilizing knowledge, around actually implementing it, and then learning and evaluating from this. And today we will talk in particular about knowledge, the role of co-creating knowledge for successful restoration. And of course, co-creation is both about a practice, but also as a research method. And in research around co-creation, often this term knowledge co-production is used, and you can see a definition there on the slide as well. And with that, I will hand over to Erik to talk a little bit about co-creation in the context of restoration.
Thank you. And I thought that even though we've introduced our approach to the whole topic, I still thought I'd step back and try to set the stage for the later presentation about exactly what we did and also what we want to discuss with you, how this can be useful or relevant in wetland restoration or water management in complicated, complex landscapes. So we're talking about restoration situated in multi-use landscapes and thus embedded in layers of ongoing governance. It is not, cannot be a disconnected intervention. And restoration potentially can serve many different purposes and thus interest. And it comes with multiple meanings. And it can draw on these to make it broadly meaningful, or it can cause conflicts. Where people are present, sites aren't only locations, they are places and thus rich with diverse values attached to them. And more broadly, and this is true for restoration as well as land uses, we know, not least from work within the IPBS, that it is possible to find solutions where landscapes do support biodiversity as well as catering for our needs for food, energy, and well-being. Next slide, please. Maria, next slide, please. And key to reaching such synergistic solutions is to know what the stakes are. What is invested in a place or in a larger landscape and in what ways? Knowing who the actors are, what their interests are, their history, and also, again, what role they play in managing the current landscape or what interest they have in future development. And furthermore, and beyond recognizing these plural or plurality of stakes and interests, we also know that people can be an asset. People's care, knowledge, resources, and competencies can be critical for successful, especially long-term successful restoration and conservation, given the right circumstances. Involvement of more and of different actors open up space and opportunity for a wider range of actions, and also more alternative ways of tackling different problems you can run into. And the challenge, and what we want to focus on today, is just how to create such conducive circumstances. Next slide, please. The work we're drawing on is grounded in 4 of the living labs, or 4 of the cases that we've been working with within ALFAwetlands. The Swedish Öland case, as Maria mentioned, and also living labs in Finland, Latvia, and Germany. And they're all of them set up around wetland restoration, or more broadly, water management and land use. And this embedded in different landscapes with different actors and circumstances. Next slide. And what we present today is based on research we've done. So it's not just engagement, outreach, or collaboration with others, but we have spent now a couple of years on researching the process, the format of dialogues and knowledge co-production, and how to reach certain desired outcomes. And what we've looked at is how to involve actors in a process of joint learning. And this in recognition that the learning process not only produce knowledge, but it can also, at least potentially, build capacity, and this both for individuals and more in a collective sense, or both to understand challenges and to come up with strategies for dealing with them. All right, next slide, and back to you, Maria.
Unmute. Okay, so we're implementing these research questions. We are drawing on a model for thinking about different kinds of knowledge that is needed then for successful restoration. And we talk about 3 different kinds of knowledge. Systems knowledge, which is about both ecological landscape factors, but also social factors such as land use or legal property rights and so on, and how they're interacting with each other. We also talk about target knowledge. So what are actually the different aspirations among actor groups, and what are perceptions of what are desired goals? So for example, a bird watcher will have some certain aspirations for particular sites, which may be different from what a farmer have. And then also operational knowledge, which is about how to then run implementations, how can you influence change and influence how things are done, how can you access funding, etc., and contribute to change. So this is the kind of framework that we've been using to design a process to connect actors, different actors' kinds of knowledge across these 3 categories. And this is then the design that we developed as a way to connect plural actors, but also their plural kinds of knowledge about a particular site or place. And the first step that we are emphasizing in this work is, of course, the need to prepare and to do this baseline mapping of what actors matter in this place, but also their respective knowledge. What kind of knowledge can they have and contribute, kind of complementary knowledge. And the way we're thinking about inviting people to an intervention to co-create together is this idea of a coalition for change. So we invited different kinds of actors that are representing different interests, but also different knowledges. So now I'm speaking about the Öland case study. We were bringing together local and regional decision makers, landowners, and Association for Heritage Protection, but also conservation, bird watchers, the fishing organizations. And we also paid attention to get these kind of bridging actors, people who kind of are spiders in the web, like the museum on Öland. And then we designed a process of 3 different workshops to bring people together. And we had those 3 kind of entry points that we wanted to work with a broad knowledge base. We wanted to work with place-based encounters and stories, and with individual as well as collective change making as a way to think towards collective action. And with this, we developed 3 workshops that we ran in Öland over 4 months. We also designed a process for active evaluation throughout the process, with both reflective activities during these workshops and also interviews afterwards to better contribute to understanding of under what context does this kind of interventions work and how. And sorry, my slide shifts are not so smooth as I would want. Okay, so again, coming back to these 3 entry points, let me tell you a little bit more in detail what we did in these 3 workshops. With this, we had around 25 actors for each workshop. And the first one, it was targeting kind of inclusive problem understanding, and we used socio-ecological systems mapping. So we invited actors to bring images that would represent what they thought were key challenges and opportunities around wetland restoration. And we also used a tool to engage with specific interventions and then talk about what actors needs to be involved and what are challenges and opportunities. And the second workshop that we designed, we spent mainly outdoors. So we wanted to really bring in this more tacit or practical knowledge among farmers or practitioners, and to bring that out to really mobilize this plural systems knowledge. So we went to 3 different sites that were 3 different sites of wetland restoration, led by different actor, and at each site we had a local actor who was the host and told the story about that place. The third workshop is really where we wanted to connect this broad knowledge base to agency and change and action for change. So we worked with visioning and strategies. We used this approach 3 Horizon, which is quite well known visioning tool to think about what are desired directions and what are ways to get there. And in groups, people discussed really strategies together as ways to connect this plural different actors and find strategies that would lead to targets that were central among many different actors. So this is what we did, how it played out on Öland. But then we also used the same kind of design and also applied it in 3 other living labs. And next we will hear from Marie Lorenz from the Succow Foundation, who will explain more about what happened in the Upper Peene Valley, which has a different context where these kind of activities came in an already ongoing long-term collaboration. Marie.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction and hi to everyone. I just quickly share my screen and then we continue. So I would like to show in my presentation some experiences from 6 years of stakeholder engagement in the Upper Peene Valley in Germany. And this presentation now is brought to you not only by me, but also by my colleague, Sophie Hürschelmann. And we both work at the Succow Foundation. It is a German NGO and also part of the Greifswald-Meyer Center. And the content of my presentation, as Maria already said, is not only part of the ALFAwetlands project, but also of 2 projects called Mowgli and More Return. And as we have some things to look at, this is a short agenda, and by the icon in the top left corner, you can then tell where we are. And starting with some locations, as we have quite an international audience here today, I just want to show you this map of Germany, and in brown color you can see the peatlands we can find in the north of Germany. And I'm now going to take you to a journey to the northeast of Germany, where we can find the federal state Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania. And here in blue again, you can see how rich in peatlands we are. And going deeper, taking a look into the map of Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania. This map here shows you the greenhouse gas emissions we can find in our federal state, and pink color indicates that we have drained peatlands with high emissions, meaning the 30 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per year. I'm now speaking to you from Greifswald, which is located just here at the Baltic Ocean, and the living lab of the Upper Peene Valley is just in the center of the federal state, where also the source of the river Peene lies, that is giving the name to the region. The Peene Valley is one of the least affected and most natural valley mires in the federal state, and then it's taking its course from the source here and discharging into the Czechine Lagoon and the border to Poland. Some pictures to illustrate you how the landscape looks like there. So we can find about 15,000 hectares of fen complexes only in the area of the living lab, and predominantly these peatlands are meadows. So that means they are either grazed by cattle or mown. And these peatlands are often drained by drainage ditches, as you can see here, but also other water control weirs and dams and pumping stations. In some areas of the living lab, we can find rewetted sites. Here in the bottom pictures, you can see some farmers already use adapted techniques to wetter conditions. So the wet use of peatlands we then call paludiculture. And then continuing with the stakeholders we were working with in the last years, just shortly showing this graph. So we have a huge diversity of stakeholders from very different areas. And in the center of this diagram is the most important stakeholder group, the farmers and property owners, as they're most affected by peatland rewetting. And I also want to make special mention of this association, the Wasserwerk der Zukunft, which is an association of the local schools, the tourism sector, and also the Farmers Union and the Water Board. So also already a strong voice in its diversity itself. Looking back what we did since 2019, these next slides go back to the work of my colleague Sophie, who can actually not be here as she is in the Peene Valley today. In the last years, she was focusing on supporting local policymaking. Already then, we made use of a special method, the landscape walk, we called it. You can see some pictures here. But also we made an effort to bring decision makers to the field. So that means organizing field days and guided visits for member states of the European Parliament and the German Parliament. Now looking back to the recent years, these are examples of the participatory formats we had within ALFAwetlands. You can see here on the left-hand side the more indoor part. So as Maria described, the interactive workshop series we conducted, but also roundtable discussions and bilateral meetings. And here on the right-hand side, we also made an effort to bring the people out, not only to the landscape walks, but also to peatland days. And last year in autumn, we had a nice excursion with policymakers and local actors speaking about, well, the problems we see in this region that go along with peatland drainage. So being a bit more explicit and showing some pictures how it looks when we take our stakeholders outdoors. So the landscape walk, as I said, we see as a mobile method, and the main point of attraction for us is to bring decision makers to the field, but even more important is to find solutions on a very local level. And this method is really good for trust building and cooperation with each other. And now I would like to continue with the co-creative processes and outcomes we have had in our living lab. And on this picture or slide, you can see the main outcome of the first workshop we had. So this is the mapping we did with our stakeholders. You can see in the outer circle our 10 different stakeholders. And during that workshop, we dealt with the question how we can achieve the transformation to wet peatland use in the Upper Peene Valley. And in the center, we then had a look at different transformative steps and probable solutions to the problems we encountered in the region. And now I would like to get a bit more into detail about the main question of this webinar, and that is how can inclusive design implementation and evaluation processes support restoration projects and strengthen local relevance and engagement. And I was speaking with my colleague Sophie, and we wanted to share with you and be quite honest that we really had no further peatland restoration implemented yet, but the planning processes were developed further, and the municipality is now in the process of rewetting one of its own peatland sites. Further on, the very municipality has now employed its own peatland manager, which is a really nice step. And we sense that in the region, there's now a greater awareness for and a greater presence of the peatland topic in general. Speaking of the project I was mentioning earlier, More Return it is called, the proposal for this project was developed in a co-creative way, one could say, with local actors and groups from the peatland region. And I'd like to explain that this is a really long-term project. It's foreseen for 10 years and wants to really implement peatland rewetting actions and establish a utilization chain for paludiculture biomass products. And the project partners in this project are the already mentioned association Wasserwerk der Zukunft and also the city administration. Another really positive side effect we could see from the landscape walks was a good connection to farmers, as we explicitly went to their sites and looking at problems they encounter. We have seen that they were positive negotiation results achieved, for example, on landowners on drinking water protection areas. Coming to an end, I want to share some lessons learned. We think that co-creation in itself is not self-serving and that it must provide added value for everyone. So when we did this workshop, we tried to only invite people and bring them together when there's something beneficial for them and something relevant, to not just host chit-chat sessions. We heard that term in working with stakeholders. And if we provided input, we also tried to respond to the interests of those involved. And we also allowed space for controversy and tension. We also think that it takes really dedicated local partners, and I want to stress here that what I present now is not the result of our work, but really a good cooperation of strong partners. So it is really important to cast a wide net and seek alliances. And in this way, one can embrace diversity in knowledge, experiences, perspectives, and interests. We also found that the limited time frame of projects causes dilemmas, and we're really happy that we had now a series of 3 projects working in that area. And in this way, co-creation can continue work, and co-creation needs continuous work, stability, and long-term contact persons. We also think that wording is important to respect the communication culture. And we sense that art and culture can be a door opener, so to say, as a social lubricant for the personal relationships and access. And lastly, walking together is really a lesson which we want to spread, and that creates informal spaces for conversations and is crucial for building trust and relationship. And to end, just a short glimpse into our next steps and visions. We want to continue the jointly developed transformative steps from the system mapping I was showing you earlier. And for example, the next steps will be a local peatland strategy and landscapes councils to be established. And of course, the project of More Return is our big vision to have a large-scale rewetting of peatlands on total of 200 hectares and to build up this paludiculture value chain. And with that, I'm finished and handing back.
Yes. So continuing where Marie left it, what we've done is to harvest the insights from each of the case studies. They are different, but they're also similar. So that's the research side of it. They all share the same problem framing, despite different context and despite also the different histories in terms of what came before our project and also how they now continue after our more active engagement. The ALFAwetland is over. So as Marie said, one of the key conclusions is that the selection and engagement of actors, key actors, is key. Not a surprise to anyone, but nevertheless, it is good to repeat and to remember. It can also reinforce initiatives to have not just the local circumstances, but to know and have opportunities to engage with other people elsewhere working on similar topics or struggling with just how to do something as a collective or solve shared problems, but from very different positions. And we also know that the long-term engagement is key. So we can initiate learning, but for it to really make a difference, the longer it can continue and you can keep it going, the more it can do. The next slide. So where we're taking this, and this is partly experience-based for us as researchers, facilitators, but it's also something we're now in the process of taking to action, as it were. It's not just scientific knowledge we produce, but it's hopefully something of use now that more of Europe is engaging in this collective effort to restore wetlands. So we have plenty of insights, but the question is, where do they fit and what could they do? So we're developing recommendations for practice and policy, but they aren't they are, as of yet, more our thoughts than really a reflection together with others of what would be the most useful ways of using the knowledge that we've produced.
Yes, thank you very much, our dear presenters, and thank you also for our participants to sharing your questions in the chat. Now we are moving to our next interactive session. It is forum discussion, participatory restoration, outcomes and need for support. I will give the floor to Maria again, and she will introduce this session.
We are very aware that Living Lab or co-creation has different entry points and different purposes and targets. That's what I mean. The Öland was more into research, whereas what Marie presented was really into implementations. And it can also be about securing support for specific interventions or more open-ended engagement. But now we would like to invite all of you who are here, because I know you're representing different projects and experiences and different positions and role. So to please share your thoughts and experience and reflections. And to do that, to also increase the sharing, we created this Padlet, and there's a link there. And I think Irina will also share it in the chat. And with that, we can move to the Padlet as well. But please feel free to share any experience or reflections, and also in this Padlet you can add within this areas with the plus. You can add your own thoughts and reflections. You can also comment on others, and we've already had a comment on how important it is to engage with local actors. So any other reflections or questions that you have for us? And you can write in the chat or just raise your hand and we will give you the word. I think we actually also already had a question for Marie on how to secure funding for these longer term projects. Could you say something about that, Marie?
Yeah, I can explain on this. Well, in Germany, there's a strong political will to restore peatlands, and a lot of money comes from well, the government. And if you apply for certain projects, then it is possible to do restoration work. And this is also the case in our project, where we have funding by the government.
Thank you, Marie. And maybe, Maria, you can share now the screen and show the Padlet, what we already have there, and see if we have some updates.
Yes.
And we also encourage all our participants to use this opportunity to discuss maybe your experience, maybe your challenges, and address your questions to our experts. We have a new comment. So I am here from
yeah, I was just saying I'm here
Yeah,
for
you can.
Wetlands, but
Great.
I can't really speak to our examples because I'm quite new to the project. I've just joined Erin Innovation quite recently. But I know a co-creation framework has been created as part of it that is going to be released soon. So yeah, it's one to keep an eye on.
Thank you for sharing and speaking. Okay, so.
And actually, Maria, if I may, because I see Sonia Mena from also Waterlands, from Wetland International. We already had some exchange previously, and Sonia would like to add here. Yes, Sonia, please go ahead. Use your microphone.
Yes, thank you, Irina. And well, good afternoon or good evening or morning. I don't know where you are. Thank you for this webinar. Actually, it is really nice to see that through the work that we have been doing for Waterlands on a very similar topic on co-creation and wetlands restoration, we have come up to the very similar results of the learnings that you were sharing, Marie and Sophie. The new part, I would say, that we have seen that we didn't work so much is what was presented on, and specifically on knowledge co-production. So the first presentation from Maria and Erik, very, very insightful. And as Mia just mentioned, maybe you were referring also to Waterlands, right? When you talk about the co-creation. So yeah, as Wetlands International, we are responsible for collecting all the learnings and all the experiences from these action sites and knowledge sites across Europe that they have been implementing and going through different challenges across the whole journey, let's say, and we are collating all this information and summarizing it and coming with the strategies to address those challenges depending on the context, because of course it's very context dependent how you can apply some tools or different strategies to overcome them. And all that knowledge is being, it will be launched in April, May, I would say. For now, it is a report, a deliverable that we submitted actually yesterday. But the more user-friendly version, it will be launched in May with April and with more illustration and nice visuals. But it will be really nice to see the work that and kind of compare the learnings more into detail from your project and our project, because I think there are many, many similarities and things that we could exchange and learn from each other on this. And maybe a question, because we identified many, many challenges, actually, more than we would like to, but also strategies related to that. But one of the challenges, it was related to how to integrate knowledge with people coming from different disciplines and backgrounds as well. So not all people from policymakers and the community and academia. And we found many issues sometimes because, of course, people tend to work in silos. And what kind of tools or strategies did you use to put in value or in the right place the knowledge, not traditional knowledge or not scientific knowledge when it comes from the community in comparison to more scientific one? So how does it play for you, and how did you address this issue?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your comments. It's very valuable for your input and also for your question. Yeah, I think doing the 3 workshops together with the same group as a series of event where people could get to, also relate and get to know each other was really key. So you become a person, not just an expert, right? And then it's easier to relate. And then I want to just reinforce what Marie was saying, how the walking together in the landscape is really very valuable. And we really were designing it in that way so that it is kind of, when you're visiting these different sites, that it becomes a more equal sharing space. So it's easier to talk about the more tacit or practical or landscape-based knowledge when you are there in the embedded one, and then in the setting in the landscape. And also then a farmer who is maybe wouldn't speak out in an office or in a meeting hall, he can easily talk about, the richness of his knowledge about soil and water and species and so on when he's in his area. So I think the walking and the play space is key, and also kind of having several different kinds of exercises and arenas to connect. And I see, Erik, you want to add something as well?
Yeah, I could expand a bit on that. So first of all, what we were very careful with was how we framed the whole discussions. So if you are too specific, or if it's understood as a discussion about a one thing, you easily lose people. So we tried to find a question that was interesting enough for everyone and that people felt that they could relate to in some way. And this is also something that we kept doing throughout the whole process in different ways, just to make sure that we kept it focused on rather hands-on things and not lost in the specific details, but rather have a discussion grounded in everyday actions, what a landscape is to you, what it is you do, what it is you think you could do. So have it more oriented towards actions than only values or opinions about things or very technical understandings of the detailed solutions. Not that you don't need the latter, it's more a question of where you start. So we started with these open and slightly more abstract questions that perhaps are a bit easier to see that you have some opinion about or have a clear thought on. And also, as we moved through the 3 workshops, each of them, as Maria said before, they had very many different ways of trying to approach a discussion, or ways of having a discussion. So just moving back and forth between these different ways of framing problems or trying to address solutions hopefully made it more likely, or we believe it made it more likely, that people found an entrance. If not immediately, then they got another opportunity or a different way of framing it rather soon. So they were not lost, or they did not opt out because they felt that they couldn't contribute. But there were many different ways, and also designed to hopefully be more attractive to different people coming from different places, and also looking at the whole situation, the whole problem differently.
Thank you, Erik. We also have a question from Philip.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so I'm Philip. I don't have a formal background related to restoration. This is more a private interest, but my background is in sustainability science. So I have other experiences in living labs. And so my question would be to the speakers, whether in your cases, did there any conflicts arise between stakeholders regarding different values related to nature, or were they all quite aligned in that regard? And if there were any conflicts, how did you go about it?
I would be happy to hear from Marie as well, but I think the way we designed it, also as Erik was saying, that to be rather inclusive in broad, there was not really conflict. It was rather quite clear from the beginning that, okay, different actors have different views on this. And that's really what we wanted to get to at the first workshop, that all these different opinions were welcome. So people could share, what they thought were core component. And then there were, disagreement, but they were not then, as we invited this individual presentation, that's kind of fine. And then we felt that throughout the 3 workshops, that was really actually key, that a key thing was that people understood each other better. And then actually could relate to, especially one of the walking session, it was just so clear, like, okay, that actually does make sense for the farmer to have this dam here, because it's positive for him, but it can also be positive for biodiversity. So I think the way we designed it was helpful to talk about these tensions without being clashes. And I don't know, Marie, do you want to add something to?
Yeah, I can just stress that of course different actors have different opinions. If you compare a farmer who wants just to use his land and to do his normal way of working on it, and then there's the necessity of peatland revetting. This is of course a big, opposing opinion. But as Maria explained, we also had the feeling that giving enough space for this controversy is really important in order to find then a solution that would be fitting for everyone. But of course, this needs time and enough time to really think of a good solution, not just a quick one that seems to be the right one. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. I was just asking because in some cases it's also so, I think that some maybe opposing views don't even ever emerge because participants may, not be willing to share or self-select in a way so that there's only the really aligned views. So thanks for the insights.
Can I do a last thing, Irina? Because I was actually curious to ask you, Sonia, about if you had any insights about what is needed to better support, if that was part of your report, if you can share any reflections on that. What is kind of, because we see a lot of positive outcomes of this participatory work, but as you were also saying, there are many challenges. So what would be some key things that is needed to better support good inclusive processes?
That is a good question. I'm thinking about the conclusions of the report now. I think one key thing that make us change a little bit some of the strategies that we were applying is to just acknowledge the power imbalance that they are just present there when you are convening and convoking different actors from different places. That you need to make it evident somehow during these meetings and to create these different spaces and formats in order for everyone to feel heard and value on their knowledge and opinions and everything. Because yeah, I think that it's also in literature one of the main critics to co-creation, that you need to acknowledge this imbalance in the powers and the different relationships among the different stakeholders and within the co-creation process. And you need to address that very specifically and clearly. So to kind of talking about the elephant in the room, more or less, and with the using different methodologies for that, of course. Otherwise, you will have the loudest voices in the room always, right? So there are some people that talks more, and the others do not dare to talk, and there is this imbalance sometimes in how the conversations are going in these spaces. And we have tried many of these tools that you mentioned, the walks, for example. We have different names for that, actually. But they're very similar tools, and it's good to see the similarities. Maybe we should complement some of those with our work. But actually, I have a question, but it's not... I don't know what it's needed. I need to think about more on the question that you asked, but I have a question that it can be related to that, maybe, if that's okay.
I think we don't have time for more questions, I'm afraid. If you want to type it in the chat, because it's nice to do that.
I will do that.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you very much. And then I will stop sharing, and I will allow for Irina to put the slides back up for us to wrap up this session. But it's nice to, okay, so if we have more questions, and we can maybe, I mean, that the Padlet will remain, so you could add things there, and we can see also if we can add a response in the chat. But just some closing reflections. What we wanted to emphasize here is this idea that we should or could really strategically use nature restoration to think about how we can support multifunctional landscapes and with diverse values, and you need co-creation for that. And along with what Sonja was saying, there is also a great need for capacity for co-creation to better recognize and strengthen, recognize existing capacity, to strengthen learning and evaluation and connect with and emphasize the need for this also in restorations projects, that you don't only need technical knowledge, you also need knowledge about how to run these kinds of processes. And we also want to keep an ongoing critical discussion about what is the use and utility of living labs and how. And for Erik and me and others in ALFAwetlands, this is something that we want to keep doing also after the project ends. So just to what we more share coming out of ALFAwetlands. So there is a handbook where we have given the details about how to do this. So it's explained both, concrete guidance of how to implement these kinds of 3 workshops. But as you saw with the presentation from Marie, we also did a little bit differently. So there's also some discussion about how you can adapt these tools to your particular case. I think that's critical. So please find that on the ALFAwetlands webpage. So we also offer training. So we will run that in March, a training for practitioners or process designers. I'll come back to that in the next slide. And we are developing a policy brief, which is under development. And we would really like to hear your input in the survey that comes after this, the end of the webinar. We will keep the Padlet there if you want to keep adding good examples or reflections. Okay, next slide, please, Irina. So just a little bit more about the training course. It will be 3 sessions over 2 weeks in March, and we'll do 3 hours per sessions. The first one will be about setting up a living lab. The second one focusing on this tool of bringing plural actors or plural knowledges together. And the third one is then how can you think about getting to inclusive integrated strategies for action. And the idea is that you sign up for all 3 sessions. You will also have tasks to practice. So we will actually together try out these different tools and approaches. And then in these sessions, discuss them together. And in the end, you will receive a certificate. But if you're looking for some guidance of how to do it and also want to meet with others who are trying things out and have some experiences, you're warmly welcome. And I think also Irina has posted a link for information about how to register in the chat. Oh, I was going to invite Erik to add anything to the conclusions. Do you have anything to add, Erik, or should we make a wrap for today?
I think we wrap it up for today, but this, as we've said before, hopefully either you or people you know might be interested in the training sessions, and we are also in the process of trying to write up actual useful recommendations for policy and practice, and for that we need to have a conversation, not just we've already engaged with many, but we need to talk to more people just to know what would be most useful across situations, across sectors and organizations. We'll never be able to speak to all of them, but the more we get to hear and the more discussions we get to have with you, with others, about just how to make use of this knowledge, the better and the more useful our recommendations will eventually be.
And I think that for the trainings, we are particularly inviting, we want to target practitioners or facilitators or people who are actually working with this in their jobs. But if there's also space, we're happy to include students or so as well. And I guess with that, I would like to thank you everyone for attending and for asking good questions and for discussing with us. And please come back to other Alpha Wetlands activities.
Thank you very much, Marie. Thank you, Erik and Marie, for sharing your experience. It's also great that our other living labs who participated in co-creation activities are here, and also stakeholders from their countries. Furthermore, it's great that our sister project Wetland is here and you are sharing your experience and we can continue exchange. With this, I would like to encourage you also follow our news on ALFAwetlands website, social media and YouTube channel. I will share the link to the registration to the upcoming training sessions in a minute. And I would like to remind you to fill out this short questionnaire survey. And if you had some questions to our speakers, which you didn't have time to address, please also add them to this short questionnaire survey answers. So with this, I would like to close the webinar and thank to all our participants. We will definitely follow up with you. Here is the link in the chat. And recording of this webinar will be available on our website soon, as well as materials of this webinar, the presentation, and so on. Thank you. Have a nice afternoon, and don't forget to fill out our final questionnaire. Bye-bye.
Bye.